Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. This is Riccardo Massacci speaking. I'm the performance expert of this, and I'm honored to be one of the presenters today, as well as your moderator for this webinar that will see the participation of amazing speakers. Let me share, first of all, the slide with the program. So, welcome to this webinar. There will be three presenters today. I will be your first presenter, and I will try to give you an overview of the performance in Cesar and also the relationship with the performance in the single European sky. The next presenter would be Jose Manuel Cordero, who is a principal ATM researcher at NIRE, and he will provide you with a more detailed view on the performance management process. So basically what solutions are expected to do to comply with performance requirements at Cesar. Finally, the last presenter, Ishar Garcia, who is also an aeronautical engineer at NIRE, will give you an overview on the future of Cesar, especially in very key important areas like use base and digitalization. Before we go into the first presentation, I would also like to share some housekeeping tips that will also help you to enjoy this webinar in a better way. So for your information, this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with you at the end of this session. If you have any question, please use on the bottom right of your screen the icon questions. This is the icon that is supposed to use for questions, while the icon next to it, chat, please use it just to talk with your fellow participants. At the end of these three presentations, so we will try to dedicate some time to the question you might have. All the other questions that will not be replied in this particular session will be replied in writing after the meeting. So as I said before, the PowerPoint presentations, the recording, and the answer to your question will be provided at the end of this webinar session. Finally, it is important for us if you could, at the end of the three sessions, provide us with your feedback on the webinar itself, and also on some questions that are aimed at capturing ways to improve these webinar sessions. But let's not lose time, and let's start with my presentation. So today I will try to explain you in a few set of slides why performance in Cesar is so important. Cesar is a performance-driven program, and why there is a need to measure these benefits, and in particular, what are the connections between Cesar and the Single European Sky Performance Scheme. I want to start my presentation with a very provocative slide, also to break the ice. What you see here is not the Ring of Brussels, but it's the toll station of a Chinese motorway. So it's a different geographical zone, of course, and it's a different industry than the one where we operate. But if you look at this picture, the problematics that are showed and that appear are very similar to the ones that the European Commission had to face back in the 90s. So, the idea behind this is to highlight some of the key performance areas that might be subject to very poor performance in the coming years for the European airspace. So we're talking about high congestion, so low capacity in the network, but also quite an inefficient system. If you think that these cars are not moving from A to B at a certain speed, and they're probably spending a lot of time in these traffic jams. So there is also a problem with punctuality, but also from an efficiency point of view, this is not the best way to commute. And also from an environmental point of view, you can imagine this is not very environmentally friendly. So all these areas, including safety, that are displayed in this first slide, were basically the main areas that somehow triggering the European Commission the need for some action. And that's also the reason why in these specific key performance areas, the European Commission has set some high-level goals. The high-level goals are, of course, very aspirational, ambitious, and that means that they try to somehow set a kind of direction where the European Commission would like the ATM system to be in the very long-term future. This is also one of the key foundation for the Single European Sky Performance Scheme that entered into action in the year 2012 with the launch of the first reference period, which lasted for 3 years. We are currently in the third reference period, which now runs for 5 years. And the objective of this performance scheme is to set some binding European Union-wide Kpis and targets in specific Kpas, which are basically the Kpis that have been identified in the high-level goals. The objective here, of course, is not to, as I showed you in the first slide, to monitor performance in all transport system, but just on aviation, in particular on the gate-to-gate air navigation services. So basically from the terminal of departure to the terminal of arrival through the en route airspace that cross, in most of the cases, several NSPs and states. So the impacted actors of this regulation are manifold, in particular NSPs, airports, but also meteorological organizations that provide meteorological services to NSPs, national service authorities, and of course Eurocontrol, in particular the network manager that provides the management of the flows at European level. Then the question for us is, what is the role of Cesar? Cesar is one of the pillars of the SES. In particular, the ATM Master Plan, which is a document that can be described as an agreed roadmap that connects the ATM development, so the research with the deployment of certain activities, has a very strong connection with the performance scheme, but of course has also a different view, a different scope. The ATM Master Plan, for you, maybe it's a very familiar document, but for those that is not that are not familiar with this document, is basically divided and organized in 3 different sub-reports, the so-called L1, L2, and L3. With being L1, the executive view of the master plan. The L2 is more focused on the architecture, on the structure of the research, and L3 is basically focusing on the planning and deployment of the research that has been developed in level 2. So as I said before, the performance scheme is focusing more on short reference periods. At the moment, each reference period is lasting for 5 years, while the ATM Master Plan is more focused on the future. It's a kind of business plan that states some long-term objectives. And when I say long-term, I mean 2035, so more than 20 years, in fact, from the moment that it was released. In this slide here, you see a bit the comparison between the high-level goals, which are very generic and have also a starting baseline referring to 2005 at the time that they were basically set up. And the master plan, which is a live document, which is, of course, published not every year, normally 3, 4, 5 years, but also try to keep into account the evolution of ATM. And of course, this also brings some updates of the ambitions and based on the actual values that are measured by the performance scheme. So there is a connection, but of course, keep in mind that the timelines are, of course, not fully aligned. Cesar is, of course, impacting, Cesar JU in particular is impacting on achieving these ambitions and is also committing to achieve the majority of the ambition that have been described in the master plan. So what is, we talk about the level 2 of the master plan, which is about the research and the activities done in Cesar JU. In fact, what we do at the Cesar JU, we develop solutions. For those that is not familiar with the Cesar solution, a Cesar solution is basically a research activity. So we fund some research activities that are supposed to mature certain ideas to a certain level that then can be transferred to the next stage of the chain, which is managed by the Cesar deployment manager, with the objective to planify and actually implement these solutions in the operational world. So airspace users like aircraft or maybe NSPs, airports, with the idea that by implementing the solutions, they will contribute to the achievement of the master plan ambitions in the different Kpis. So in-house, we have published a catalog that you see on the right here on the presentation, which contains all solutions and their expected performance contribution. So again, very important to understand the difference between what we do in Cesar and what is done at the level of performance scheme. The performance scheme is actually monitoring the achieved performance, so the actual performance achieved by the system yesterday. So 1st of January 2022, the idea is to report on performance achieved in real operations in 2021. So the measurements are basically based on real operations, and the impact of this performance scheme, as I showed you before, is quite wide. So it goes from Eurocontrol, NSPs, airports, and so on and so forth. When we talk about the Cesar JU, we are talking about a simulating environment. So we are developing some research activity that will have an impact in the future. So in order to estimate the impact of these solutions, we have to project and simulate with fast-time simulation or real-time simulation what would be the effect of this solution when integrated at ECAC level. So the view, the scope is different, the timeline is different, but also the impacted actors are slightly different, because in Cesar, we mostly focus on innovation on NSPs, airports, and also airspace users, which are not directly impacted by the performance scheme. So how do we do this measurement? Jose Manuel will go more into details of this, but we have in-house a Cesar performance framework, which has been developed by the team led by Jose Manuel, which contains a very detailed description of Kpis and Kpis impacting those Kpis, and also describing the influencing factors of these Kpis per Kpa. Kpis per Kpa. Solutions that work in Cesar are expected to measure. So to measure what would be their contribution if these solutions are then deployed. And this quantification is done by the solution. Of course, we have in-house a very specific methodology, which Jose Manuel will describe later. And the final objective is to get performance measurements at ECAC level for each solution, and all the contribution of different solutions are then aggregated by 94, a specific team of experts, to provide an aggregated view on the performance of the Cesar JU solutions vis-a-vis the master plan ambitions. This report is called PAGAR, and it's actually one of the jewels of Cesar JU. Because it's very factual. Of course, there is a lot of expert judgment as well, but there is a very structured methodology that he's founding and that stands behind this report. Now, in this slide here, I will not go into details, but you have an attempt to compare the single European sky high-level goals with the performance scheme indicators, and the master plan ambitions definitions with the performance framework Kpis that refer to these specific ambitions. I just maybe will not spend too much time on this slide, but I will maybe give you an example with cost efficiency, just to make you more familiar with the reasoning behind our request for performance measurement, but also to show you the differences between the two frameworks that we have discussed in the previous minutes. So when we look at the indicator that is described in the performance scheme, basically the performance scheme refers to the so-called average determined unit cost. So average, because it's an average between the EU states plus Norway and Switzerland that decided to be part of the scheme. And of course, the total determined costs refers to the costs that are borne by the actors you see in this line, so NSPs, airport, NSAs, Eurocontrol, etc., to provide the ATM services. Staff cost, operating cost, like the rent of a building, depreciation, which refers to the purchase of the technology that is implemented in the NSPs, for example, and cost of capital is the cost related to the loans that allow NSPs to buy this technology, and exceptional cost. So all the costs for these actors make up the total determined cost. The denominator of this indicator is the service units, which is an indicator that takes into account not only the number of movements, but also the maximum takeoff weight of aircraft that belong to this, that are part of these movements. So it's not exactly the indicators we use in-house. In-house, we had to break down the cost efficiency ambition into sub-indicators, which is one kind of productivity indicator, and the other one is an indicator that show the reduction of cost of technology. And why is this? Because the research we do in-house is actually focusing on these two areas, and therefore, on one hand, is limiting the number of stakeholders that benefit of these potential technological solutions. But also when it comes to the denominator, so the total service units cost, we cannot use this indicator because we are working in kind of simulating environments. So it's much easier for us to use simply movements. So the pie here is just to tell you that indeed, Cesar GU, with their research, they're trying to impact as much as possible to determine cost. But it's also true that there is some other improvements that are expected by other actors, for example, NSPs, that definitely have a major role in achieving the so-called determined unit cost, how it is described by the performance scheme. So, to conclude, I hope my presentation was clear enough to understand why we are pushing on performance so much and why Cesar is a 100% performance-driven program. So it is very important for us to identify the gap between what is expecting from the pipeline to be the performance contribution vis-a-vis the master plan ambitions. It is also important for us to set some kind of expectations, because you can imagine that NSPs that want to implement Cesar solution also wants to understand what would be the return on investment. And this, of course, if it is a well-done exercise, also helps and accelerates the deployment of these solutions in real life, and of course accelerates also the achievement of the objectives set by the European Commission. And on top of that, it's also useful for us because based on these estimates, we can allocate the resources in a more efficient way. So to conclude with this slide, yes, we do have an impact on the achievement of the single European sky performance objectives. Nevertheless, as I told you, there are some differences in terms of scope, alignments, also probably a way of measuring some indicators, but this doesn't mean that the objectives between the two frameworks are different. In fact, both of our, let's say, both the performance framework in Cesar and the performance scheme is aiming at improving performance at European level. And the last slide, I will not go into details because Jose Manuel will cover part of this. This gives you an overview of the achievements published in Paragraph 2019 vis-a-vis the master plan Kpis. And just for your information, there has been some strong and maybe unexpected improvements in certain areas. Other areas maybe require more resources, but at the end, thanks to the performance management process, we are in the position to understand which gaps require more resources and a special focus in the future. So this comes to the end of my presentation. I thank you very much for your attention. I would like to now pass to the second presentation, which will be led by Jose Manuel. And I will intervene later for the last presentation. Jose Manuel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Thanks for the kind introduction and the setting of the the framework. I think is goes fully in line with what I'm going to say. I got the funny part of the presentation. I'm going to try to drive you through some of the specific technical details of how we play the performance management process within Cesar, from transversal area, consolidating things, and from the solutions perspective, if I may. So we are going to give you an overview. This is a huge building that has been built by many teams in many of the best experts in performance across Europe in a coral effort during many years. And yeah, I will try to go on this. If you have any question, as Ricardo said, please don't hesitate to put that. And also, if you have potential interest in a follow-up session, that is something that we would be very interested to know about. So the first thing, and was also introduced by Ricardo, is why do we need to assess performance? And he really give the clue is we need to understand the impact that a new concept, that a new solution is bringing into the ATM system. This is absolutely fundamental. I would say is paramount that we understand how a new concept will develop when deployed, and also in isolation, but also in relationship to the rest, and also the trade-offs in performance that may bring. So it's important also to understand which are the negative effects that a new concept may bring into the system. This is also something that we like to look at. In Cesar, in this wave, we have around 80 solutions. This is a huge number. And when you start to think about them, and if all of them were going to assess their benefits in a different way, that would quite likely make consolidation impossible. This is an experience we learned at the beginning of Cesar 1. And certainly, it was very clear the need for harmonization, to speak a common performance language, to assess benefit in a common way. This allows not just benchmarking, which might be of relative interest, but certainly allows to consolidate at a global level and consolidate at a subset of solutions, which is something that will certainly deliver clues when it comes to decision-making on deployment. And this tool is what we call Cesar Performance Framework, this common reference language. As also introduced by Ricardo, you could, in principle, designate that as a set of KPIs, key performance indicator, per Kpis, key performance area. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There is a lot of process, methodologies behind. And also rationale that I will try to introduce you about in this presentation, why some choices were made and which is the impact of these choices. This work is done in a choral way, as I said. There are some, this is done on one side by solutions themselves, on the other by a team that we are at the NER, we are honored to be leading, but absolutely this is a choral effort, not just now with the team that is doing performance, but also throughout the years in Wave 1, in Cesar 1. So there are many people who can be proud of the building that has been put in place. So, which is the scope of Cesar performance? What do we talk about when we refer to Cesar performance? We consider 6 domains, which are pretty much in line with some of the information presented in the performance ambition. First, we group some of the traditional EKO KPIs in one overall domain, which we call operational performance. This addresses some of them, the traditional one: capacity, predictability, punctuality, cost efficiency, and so on and so forth. Being very simplistic, some of those that you can merely apply a formula to compute. And then we have some methodologies, some more specific methodologies that you need some background and some expertise and potentially some training, more than simply applying a formula to a given input data. And they are addressed there. Environment, and I think that the program can very proudly say that they have been paying a specific attention to environment before it was so much under the spotlight as is today. So this has been a separate area since the very beginning of the program. Same with human performance. The program is very aware of the centric role of the human and the need to assess it. It's not valid that we deliver an excellent number in terms of at the cost of an unmanageable human factor as impact, I would say. Exactly the same with safety. So everything needs to be put in a balance. It's not just about the individual KPIs, but the overall picture. Complementarily, the system addresses cybersecurity, which is in a quite innovative way, in my view, and a non-traditional approach, and certainly something that is more a grouping of the previous areas or the previous domains, but also addresses the cost part, and is also very much showing the interest in facilitating and giving all the tools for successful deployment, which is the cost-benefit analysis. All solutions, or actually even some exploratory research projects are required to deliver this. The foundations of this building come from there is long legacy on this activity, although we always keep an eye on the future, as my colleague Cesar will introduce later on, in order to try to, of course, keep this updated in the new needs and new horizon for aviation and ATM domain. So I will present from a very high level the performance workflow that is followed at a program level in this case. So we consider that this is a progressive refinement. We deliver few iterations, few pictures of the performance results during the wave, during the successive waves, based on three main pillars that will be the guiding thread during the rest of my presentation. The first is the reference that we use, validation targets. You can see them as the translation at a lower level of the performance ambitions in the ATM master plan. Second, the common language, performance framework, which are the indicators that we are going to use, at least to express the benefits from Cesar. And third, the consolidated report, the picture that we are delivering out there, performance assessment and gap analysis report, or PAGAR. So it all starts with validation targets. We will, and I will go deeper on this in a moment. We will set the reference for every solution at the beginning, which is the estimated initial impact, even before they really get too much in the concept development work. And then solutions will do their business. They will research, they will develop their concept, and they will progressively mature that. Always within the context of performance framework, every solution will move progressively from initial estimations, expert judgment, into actual experiments that are delivering factual results. In intermediate times during each wave, we will take a consolidated picture. We call that interim PAGAR. This is representing the picture of the current wave, but the number of intermediate iterations may vary, but it's not really significant. At the end, we get the final PAGAR. What you see is that the results may vary because sometimes the estimations are more optimistic than the actual results. Sometimes it's the other way around. So you may observe that the final results of PAGAR diverge from the interim ones in both directions. It's not always the same case, but the important part here also is the light orange box. It reflects the uncertainty or the confidence in the results that we have. Of course, the more estimations we have, the less confidence we can have, and we apply that into an internal metric to be able to tell also decision makers how much we trust the figures that we get. With this, we make a gap analysis, and we analyze why some results were below initial expectations or above them. And this is also useful information at program level. As I said, the three pillars play a key role in all this. So the first pillar, the cornerstone one, is validation targets. This is a reference that we set at a very early stage on the very initial days of every wave with solutions. Can be later updated if necessary, and quite often is necessary due to many circumstances, but at least we provide an initial reference. This will be, this can be considered as performance estimations. Maybe the branding is not the perfect one, but it's something that is also intended to change in the future. What is important here is that we get this a priori estimation of benefits. We are able to sit together with solutions and be able to coordinate or agree with them which areas they are impacting. These areas are the ones that the program expects at least the solution to assess. assessing performance take a cost, implies some effort, and we really need to focus on where the benefits are. So we eventually reach a handshake with solutions so they know beforehand where is the potential impacts that they will have. But this is not the end of the story. This is just an initial step allowing them to work. Then it comes their planning work. And the planning work should be based on performance framework, because we have told them the minimum set of KPIs that we expect them to assess. And then they need to go into performance framework and see, these are the indicators that I should use at least to assess this performance. I need to feed them with data and so on and so forth. I will describe that in a moment. But a very usual question that we receive when we speak about performance framework is how you select the indicators. Why these and not others? We all know that there are different ATM performance references out there. We are very familiar, of course, with ICAO. We are very familiar with performance scheme. We know the metrics in the ATM master plan. The easiest thing to do would be to directly capture them and use them, but this is not always possible. And we need to understand why. And that's why I'm trying to give a quick description on the 3 dimensions that we consider to select one indicator or another. The first is the representativeness. It's very clear that an indicator, a KPI that you use, need to represent the area, the dimension that you want to assess, and also to be able to be sufficiently dynamic to reflect changes. Performance is one tool to refine, to tweak the concept, and if you adapt a concept slightly, the indicator should be able to refer that. Otherwise, the concept will, the changes will be not appreciated and not even unnoticed. But the key part to answer the question above is applicability. And for this, I'm bringing here an example. This is a radar track or a flight flying from Luxembourg to Madrid. I think I captured this a couple of days ago. And in real life operation, you would simply use the track and compute, for instance, the horizontal flight efficiency. You have all the data. You have the exit point from the initial ASMA area and the entry point to the arrival one. But in simulation domain, you do not simulate the whole space, in particular in real-time simulation. So you would simulate an area which does not refer to an ACC or may not refer to an ACC at all, maybe a set of sector or an ad hoc airspace, and that's the area where you have the information from. And actually, you don't even get realistic information on the entry and exit point because there is not actual coordination. So you are lacking essential information that you need for the indicator, or in some cases, simply to use the indicators, and in other cases, for the indicator to be sufficiently meaningful in terms of performance management. So there are cases where the indicator cannot be directly adopted in a research environment, and this is fundamental as well. The third dimension here is understandability. Please note that the indicators should be developed by the solutions. The solutions will select the indicators and will implement them. The more complex the indicator is, the more likely is that there are divergences in the way of implementing, and there are some assumptions that may provide wrong information with the indicator. So we try to remain the indicator as clear, as understandable as possible. So it's a balance of these 3 dimensions, another ones potentially that delivers the final picture, which is not static at all. We regularly look at things and complement and enhance the performance framework. It's important to highlight here that at program level, every bit counts. If you see there are some KPIs or some areas where there are a limited number of solutions contributing, and in screen you can see a couple of them. TMA capacity or en route capacity, in particular in TMA capacity, if I count well, there are 7, or there were 7 in the wave where I captured this from. So it's important in particular to focus on not missing any performance impact, either positive or negative. We are not claiming just to drop the negative effects. Actually, that's the wrong way. And again, I will mention that in a moment. But it's important that we are able to not to lose impacts, not to lose knowledge about the impact of a solution our research activity, a subsystem into the future ATM domain. And that's why we put a lot of focus in solutions to stick to this common language, to this performance framework. Even at solutions that are lower maturity level, I'm more and more happy to see how exploratory research solutions show interest and adopt the metrics from performance framework in their benefit assessment. But also please note that the performance ambition are just a limited set of the benefits that the SESAR program is bringing. Of course, it's the reference that we have. So not in all cases we will have this reference, but the system, the SESAR program, is also bringing benefits in other areas such as, let's say, noise management or these kind of things that are not directly related to ambitions, but certainly are delivered. Okay. So I will now give you an overview of the process, kind of an example of how a solution does their performance work. So the first thing that they get is the validation targets, as the performance estimation. What am I impacting and where? In which operating environments? TMA, airport, high complexity, medium complexity, where am I impacting? So this is given, as I said, by validation targets, which will shape very similar to this. So the solution will get something looking like this table. You are impacting in safety, and we expect that you have a relatively high impact in airport capacity and an average impact in TMA capacity. So these KPIs, at least, we would like to see them addressed in accordance with performance framework. With this information, the solution is able to start working. They will plan their validation activity, given their resources, their tooling, their expertise, etc. And they will go deeper on that. So initially, they will have the validation targets, telling that they have a positive impact in TMA capacity and an uncertain but sure impact in safety. These are the validation targets. And as a result of their internal work and internal assessment, they can also identify additional impacts. For instance, they could deteriorate cost efficiency or improve fuel efficiency, or they can consider that they need to assess that in order to prove those impacts. After this analysis and with all this information, the solutions will deliver the validation plan, meaning identifying the validation environments, selecting the indicators from the set in the performance framework, recording, making sure that the validation platform is able to record the necessary data to fit these indicators, and then they will develop their activity plan. I can very confidently tell you that a good quality performance assessment is mostly based in a good validation plan. After that, the solution will execute the validation activities according to the plan. Of course, this is real life, and it's likely that we have some gaps. This may happen, and they are recorded. I'm bringing a picture of a very recent validation activity in tower environment within an air. But yeah, here you would record data to later on compute indicators. You may record questionnaires, etc. You may record any information that would be necessary to deliver performance assessment. And eventually, you will compute your performance results, extrapolate at the KEK area. This is important because you cannot compare local benefits. You need to extrapolate at the KEK area in order to report. And typically, a report in SESAR, a performance assessment report in SESAR, is a set of tables in this direction. All the KPIs will have a table, and you will be recording your results in the right KPIs. So this is an example. And here you can see in the right column the confidence in results that I was mentioning before. So according to the validation technique that it was used in the exercise, to the statistical significance of the number of runs, to the methodology, to the opinion of the validation leads, they will deliver a qualitative input on that will be later on reflected in the consolidation of results. Here, I would like to highlight two things. One is that this is the food that Pagar gets. So the best this food is, the best quality the program will deliver. That's why we put so much focus on solutions to really follow the right steps through this process, which I can very gladly say that they normally do. Is a real pleasure to work with these committed teams within solutions. And something important that has been raised by Cesar Scientific Committee many times in the past is that in research there are non-negative findings. So if a solution identifies a performance impact that deteriorates a given KPI, that's absolutely valid. And that does not jeopardize the value of the concept itself. It's something that is necessarily to know for decision makers later on, and how to really include and deploy that potential solution or project or results in the actual system. And eventually it comes Pagar. This is the right time for the transversal area in performance to come and consolidate the inputs given by solutions. So we will receive a set of consolidated or reports per solution, aggregating all the benefits. We will put them in the mixer with the right number of assumptions, etc. So traffic assumptions, technology availability assumptions, etc. All of them together to make them coherent assessment, and we will deliver the ultimate consolidated picture with this Pagar, which, thanks Ricardo for the kind words. It's very glad to mention that this is a kind of flagship. I think that the team behind can be really proud of the work they do. Still, this is a huge challenge. In performance, 1 + 1 is not 2, or is not always 2 at least. And here is where the interdependencies play a big role. This methodology in interdependencies was developed in Wave 1 by excellent colleagues within Eurocontrol, and is able to be interviews with solution, be a cross-check of the different solutions, identify how different solutions interact one with each other. So 2 solutions may be compatible or absolutely exclusive. I mean, for instance, you could have some solutions that are not able to work together. Let's say flight-centric with multi-sector planner. So you cannot simply sum their benefits is one or the other. Same with solutions that are compatible, but their aggregated results may be actually overlapping or not, or they may be completely independent. So all this work in interdependencies is absolutely key for consolidation at program level on one hand, but also this has the potential to be consolidated at any subset of solutions that you may choose. This is also a very powerful tool when it comes to identifying opportunities for future deployment. So I thought would be interesting to bring here this picture of Pagar. This is the final snapshot of Pagar at the end of Wave 1. This is where we were at the end of Wave 1. What you see in blue are those solutions during the life of Cesar, from Cesar 1 to the end of Cesar 2020 Wave 1, that reach B3, consolidating their performance benefits. What you see in dark gray is those that is coming in the pipeline. Those solutions, those benefits that are coming in the pipeline, not yet B3, but that are going or were going to be continued in Wave 2 and Wave 3 consecutively. So this is already still, the benefits may vary, but they look like this is what they are going to deliver. And still, the program may have something in the pocket, which is the light gray area, which are solutions not yet B3, that are not immediately continuing in Wave 2 or Wave 3, but maybe continue in the future. As you can see, there is still way to go in some KPIs, but most of them are looking good, considering that the performance ambition is aiming at 2035. And just to conclude my presentation, I introduced before that we are very much aware of the need to support people working in performance. For this, we put in place several tools. And I'm personally very proud, and I would like to thank the people who really pushed for it in the past, and again, very excellent colleagues. I think Cesar Community of Practice is one of the jewels of the program. This is a meeting point, a community of experts, of domain experts. It's very difficult to find such a number of experts from the different solutions working together and also giving opinion on how this should be enhanced. So really, when you find things in performance framework, it's not a decision of one or even a decision of five. It's a decision of a huge group of people within Europe, really seeing the pros and cons of every decision. This is open to anyone within Cesar program willing to join. So I would really like to invite you to join the right community of practice. There is one per domain as introduced initially, and there are complementary domains such as civil-military cooperation, validations, etc. We also provide training, regular trainings. They are published in Cesar webpage, so please be aware of this in case you need additional training in some of the domains. There is reference material, a lot of it is difficult to digest. You all know how these methodologies are, but it still is there. I would suggest to complement also with participation in the community of practice. And finally, there is the people, the expert. The performance management transversal area is very proud to be able to collaborate with solutions and to devote one point of contact per project, per solution. This person plays the ambassador role and is the first line of support to the solution. So we are very glad to be able to work together with solutions, and I think that's really bringing a lot of value into the program. And this is a very high level summary of how we work today in Cesar, but we don't keep blind about the future. So I would like now to pass the ball to my colleague Isiar Garcia-Obies, who will debrief you on how we move into that future.
Okay, thank you, Jose Manuel. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this third part of the webinar, in which I'm going to talk about you the benefits of a modernized ATM system and how they can be assessed through the lens of the performance framework that Jose Manuel has just explained. Okay, so the ATM system, as you all know, is in continuous evolution by the implementation of new concepts and new solutions that are being developed through the time. And the performance framework that we have just presented is flexible enough to adapt to these new challenges that we have in the ATM system so that we can assess and measure the impact they will have in the future. So for today's presentation, I have selected 3 topics that are of interest nowadays to show you how they can be incorporated into the performance framework so that they can be assessed. In the first place, we will talk about the US space as it represents the evolving demand that we are having nowadays in the European skies and that will be implemented and fully deployed in the next few years. Then we will also talk about something that is gaining a lot of interest in the past years, which is the increase of quality of service represented by passenger experience. In fact, this will be one of the main areas to tackle in future SESAR 3. And also we will talk about digitalization as it represents a transformation in the service provision that we have nowadays in the ATM. Okay, so let's start by the US space. As you all know, if you are familiar with this concept, it is expected that by the year 2050, there will be tens of millions of flights annually in our skies. And the vast majority of these flights will be represented by drones flying in a very low altitude, below 50 feet in meters. So there will be lots of drones, which is great different with respect to what we have nowadays in our airspace. By the year 2030, it is expected that this will be fully deployed and will be scaled up with the years. So with this in mind, we can have the question on how to assess the impact that the future US space concept will have in today's airspace. And as you can guess, we can assess this through the performance framework. The thing is that the performance framework that we have nowadays and that Jose Manuel has presented with the list of KPIs and KPIs is not adapted to the US space concept because it relies on metrics specific to the traditional ATM system. So with this in mind, we need to evolve the existing framework to adjust to this to this new concept in order to evaluate the input that projects currently working in US space and in future Cesar 3 in this area could assess. So within PG19, we are currently working in this task so that we have this framework for the future Cesar 3, and I'm going to show you some of the ideas in which we are working. But of course, this will be a first version that will be evolved based on the needs of the future concept once it is refined through the years. Okay, so as I said, this US-based performance framework will be used to guide the deployment of future US-based projects based on the performance assessment. And the areas will be linked to the ones that we traditionally have in the ATM, for instance, capacity, cost efficiency, mission efficiency, safety, security, environment, human performance, flexibility, access and equity, and interoperability. Among these, we can say that safety, security, and human performance methodologies will remain similar, as no major changes are expected for these areas. But for others, such as environment, there will be a lot of new indicators in order to assess the social acceptance of the drones in the airspace, especially in terms of noise and visual impact, which are things that are a great concern for the society once this US-based concept is fully deployed. And also regarding this concept, new indicators will be put in place regarding access and equity to ensure a fair access of drones to the airspace, and regarding interoperability, which is something that is not in the traditional ATM performance framework, but which is of interest for the US-based concept. So indicators on this area will be put in place. And with all of these solutions working in this area could assess their impact. And just to also make a link with what Ricardo presented in his first presentation, for the case of the US space, the performance ambitions are not applicable nowadays, but as he mentioned, these performance ambitions will be evolved through the years to incorporate new challenges, as for instance, the US-based concept. So this means that for this first version of the US-based performance framework, we won't have performance ambitions, but we will in the future. And also a difference with respect to the traditional ATM performance framework will be that in the US-based solutions won't be able to provide the impact in comparison with a reference scenario, because of course the US-based concept is not yet deployed, so we cannot compare against the actual situation. We can only have a taste of what the improvements could be. Okay, so that was for the US space, and now we are going to talk about another topic of interest in future Cesar 3, which is the passenger experience. As you all know, by the year 2050, there is a European goal to have all the 90% of travelers within Europe completing their journey in less than 4 hours, which is a great change with respect to what we have nowadays. And the contribution of the ATM system to the achievement of this goal, it's very important as it ensures a smooth journey. So again, through the lens of the performance framework, we will be able to assess if this goal is really achieved. So this activity is something that is not yet initiated in the work of the PG19.4 of the performance management team, but given the importance that it will have in future Cesar 3, it is probable that some indicators will be derived for this passenger experience topic. But for the moment, it's true that we can use some of the ones that we have nowadays in order to start having an idea if the solutions working in this area are really having the impact that we desire in this area. So for instance, we can use indicators in the operational efficiency or cost efficiency key performance area to see if there is an increase in predictability that will be translated also in more flexibility and more resilience of the network. Also, we can see if there is a reduction in the departure delays at airports that could be translated in more flights at these airports. Also regarding the environment, which is one of the key topics of the program, to see if there is a reduction in the fuel burn and the CO2 emissions. And also regarding safety, we can assess through the methodology that we have in today's performance framework if this improvement in passenger experience keep the level of safety at the level that we have now without degrading it. But as I said, this is something that could be evolved because the performance framework is in constant evolution to adapt to the new challenges, and this could be one of the areas of work for future SESAR 3 in this performance framework. And as a third topic, I would like to show you the work done in digitalization. This is something which is already initiated, given the importance in this transformation that the service provision is experiencing in the last years. And as you know, nowadays we have an ATM system that has a very fragmented infrastructure where there is not so much sharing of information among stakeholders. Also, this is improving through the time, but for the future, it is expected that the system will be fully digital, and we need to assess the level of digitalization achieved by each of the solutions in order to know if there is a change of paradigm with regards to digitalization. And again, we can use the performance framework to assess it. We can evolve the performance framework that we have and create a new area, which is the digitalization assessment, to measure this in terms of performance. Just to give you an idea of where this digitalization interests come, in the digital, we have from the European Commission a document, which is the European Digital Market Strategy document, in which it was first published the DESI, the Digital Economy and Society Indicator, which is a composite index that shows the level of digitalization of each of the European countries. But this is something that is not specific to any industry, and it's quite abstract. So in the ATM community, we have a first attempt to translate it to be usable for SESAR solutions in the European ATM Master Plan through the ATM Digital Index, which is the one shown in the slide. This indicator is an analogy of the so-called DESI indicator of the European Union, and it covers four areas, which are connectivity, automation, virtualization, and industry liberalization, and they are all weighted so that each of them have a relative importance and they have percentage assigned. But this is not fully aligned with what we have in the performance framework, but it's something from which we can start working. So based on this idea, proposing this ATM Digital Index, within PG 19.4, we derive a new definition of digitalization that will be used for this later measurement of the digitalization performance. So the concept that we propose in this area is to have three technical pillars that compose digitalization, which will be digitization, connectivity, and data sharing, meaning digitization, the conversion from analog to digital, connectivity, the establishment of physical and operational layers to actually share data, and the data sharing, the actual sharing of data among stakeholders. But these technical pillars, which constitute digitalization, should be accompanied by increased levels of automation and virtualization in order to achieve a full digitalization of the system. And since this description is still quite abstract, what we propose is to have several levels to be assessed through metrics that solutions could use in order to determine their level of digitalization. And these levels are an analogy with the automation levels that we have in Cesar that you may be familiar with. So, for instance, we will have level 0, which will be an analog phase where the majority of the data is still analog and only some information is converted into digital form. To move to a level 1, in which there will be a partial digitization, that is the start of the digitalization by the first pillar of digitization. And at this level, some of the processes will be carried out in a digital form, and there will be some delays in the time taken to use the information. Then we will move to level 2, where there will be a full digitization. At this step, all of the processes will be in a digital form, and the data will be used for post-analysis. And there will be some initiatives to start connecting stakeholders to share the data. So that leads us to level 3, in which there will be a partial connectivity and data sharing. At this step, digital technologies will be put in place for many processes, and there will be some interconnections for the data sharing. And finally, level 4, which will achieve the full connectivity and data sharing. In this case, the majority of the processes will be digital. There will be lots of interconnections and data sharing among stakeholders, and the data will be easily accessible from many places. And once we achieve this, we move to level 5, which will be the digitalization, which combines all of the 4 previous levels. And at this time, information will be used in real time with smart capabilities, and there will be some use for the multimodal environment. Okay, so through this matrix of levels, solutions will be able to assess at which level they are, because it's true that digitalization doesn't have a clear start or end, so we have to guess at what point we are at each moment. And in order to determine it, what we propose within this digitalization task that we are carrying out to evolve the performance framework in this direction is to have metrics for each of the 3 technical pillars of digitization, connectivity, and data sharing, so that solutions could assess these indicators as they do for other key performance areas, such as capacity or cost efficiency. And through the combination of the results of the metrics that they have assessed for each of the 3 pillars, they can get an idea of the level at which they are in terms of digitalization. And this could be used for future deployment or for future prioritization of solutions. And this leads me to the end of the presentation, but I want to finalize with the idea that the performance framework is a product that is fully adaptable to the challenges that we have. And in today's presentation, I have shown you 3 examples, 3 topics that are being conducted now, but can be many others that will come in the future. And whatever these new improvements and proposals that we have could always be measured to quantify their impact and guide on the future deployment or the future interest. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ishar. Thank you, Jose Manuel, for your very comprehensive and clear presentations. Before we move to the questions and answer session, I would like to ask you whether you could fill in the poll. You will see on the bottom right of your screen an icon polls. So if you could please support us with this activity, we'd be very grateful. Okay, we can proceed to the questions and answer session. I've seen a lot of interesting questions popping up. I would like maybe to start, just to break the ice. I've seen a very interesting question by Ben Van Houten. So how close is alignment between the Cesar performance framework and the Cesar performance scheme set up by the European Commission and administered by the performance review body? So as I displayed in my slides, of course, there is a very strong connection between the two, and high influence that Cesar has on the performance scheme. The difficulty to create a one-to-one relationship is, of course, given by the different nature of activities that are undertaken by Cesar and that are measured by the performance scheme. My personal view is that there is a possibility to map some kind of influence, a diagram showing the influence of the indicators we have in-house and the impact that they have on actual performance. So we have discussed already several times with Jose Manuel how we could tackle this this issue, and we have some good ideas with all the limitations given by the definition of this performance to the performance scheme.
Ricardo, I think you were frozen for a moment, so maybe your last sentence was lost.
Okay, so I just said, can you hear me now?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, I just want to say that the idea indeed is to try to describe the influence that Cesar and performance capture in Cesar has on the actual performance of the that is actually measured by the performance scheme.
If I may comment on that as well, and actually I apologize for not saying that, but performance framework is a public deliverable, as is everything within Cesar, with the exception of Pagar, the full Pagar, because the executive view is public. So transparency in performance reporting, as I answer one question, is fundamental. But there is an initial mapping on that, a table which initially maps the indicators in performance scheme with those in performance framework, will be elaborated in the direction that Ricardo hints, but there is an initial flavor on that. So yeah, I'm very glad also to hear opinions and ways of suggestions on improving that or to maximize alignment. There is no interest on Cesar's side to reinvent the wheel when there are good indicators. It's just make our life more complicated.
Okay, then I would like to answer a question by Ipek Ukunku. I hope I pronounce the name correctly. How do you plan to match Pagar with Cesar 3 open calls? Will there be special sections related to the Pagar in the proposal template? Well, not really a specific section referring to Pagar, but of course, solution projects will be asked, and this is a new feature, to estimate their qualitative impact on of their solutions or solution projects. So what we expect any entity getting Cesar funding is also to provide a view on what would be the return on investment. So if we give you some funding, what would be the impact of your research activities and solutions and solution projects on the ATM? So that's a new feature that would be introduced. I don't know if you, Jose Manuel or Isha, spotted any interesting questions you would like to.
Yeah, I actually I have one on the screen again. Apologies for the pronunciation, from Sebastian Ricaguer. Does the Pagar only consider completed B3 Tier 6 solutions? No, the answer is no. It considers everything, but of course, as I said, the confidence in the results is different. Pagar is not just willing to identify what is now done, but also what is coming in the pipeline. So we can know where what is coming in the pipeline is going to be enough or not. So certainly Pagar addresses all of these features. As you have seen, if you remember the dark gray and the light gray areas in my final, almost final slide, those gray areas are not B3 or not TRL6. Some of them are immediately continuing, and the other are not immediately continuing, but candidates for future continuation.
Okay, thank you. There was a question for Isher. I'm trying to scroll down. Yeah, it's a bit difficult to navigate through the question. Anyway, I've seen that Hans Hollengren has also sent a request to clarify my last slide. I think it connects a bit to what Jose Manuel said. So the last slide wants to highlight the achievements of Cesar solutions that have reached V3, so the highest level of maturity that is measured at Cesar GU. And these values refer, of course, are measured against the master plan ambition. So when you see, for example, for fuel efficiency of 4%, it's a 4% improvement on kilograms of fuel per flight. And when you compare to the master plan ambition that has a 5-10% range, meaning 5% being the low ambition and 10% the high ambition, this means that so far Cesar is expected to contribute to, let's say, the low ambition. So the idea here is to highlight the gaps between the master plan ambitions and what is measured in Cesar GU. And this is the starting point for driving the program in the future in order to allocate in a more efficient way the available resources in order to close the identified gaps. So I hope this answers clarify. Let me see other questions. I will probably navigate by upvotes.
There is a bunch of them. I may take one of them if I may, because it's quite straightforward. It's about the difference between the KPIs and the benefit mechanisms. One is conceptual and the other is a measure. So the KPI is the indicator to express a benefit mechanism. So benefit mechanisms is an impact that you're having in improving capacity, in deteriorating predictability. And you express that means by means of a KPI.
Okay, question for Isher. I get all difficult names today. Okwari Oseshas, I hope it's the right pronunciation. I'm surprised not to see separation as an indicator for performance. Is that capture under capacity? I will concede that they are related, but they are also different.
Yeah, it's true that they are related, but separation will be considered in the safety methodology. And also for some of the indicators that we plan to have for capacity, they will have some relationship to them. But as you said, both of them are fully interrelated, so it's impossible to have them by separate. So we will have to tackle it in both areas and then to assess the interdependency among them. But yeah, we can say as a short answer that it is part of it under the capacity, but not fully also in the safety key performance area.
Okay, thank you, Isher. Another very nice question by Ben Van Houten. Does Pagar actually deliver true ex post facto assessment? Is this coordinated with Cesar Deployment Manager? Well, Jose Manuel, maybe we can answer together.
This is question. An excellent question. An excellent question.
I really like this.
And I think it's the future. At Cesar program level, we don't have actual operations, data after results. So it's not something that can be done nowadays intramuros Cesar. But I know, and maybe it's the part where you can complement Ricardo, that is there is a strong interest and a strong appetite within SGU to close this loop.
Yes, indeed, and we have launched an internal, I would say, improvement process where we try to indeed close the loop. It's not an easy task for several reasons because of lack of data, Most of the data lies for the deployment part into NSPs, most of the data actually. And there is some information, but it's scattered a little bit around, so we need also to rationalize what we can obtain. And then there is also another issue between what we can measure as performance in a PAGAR, which is focused on future deliverables, and what we can actually measure as implemented today. So the difficulty is, of course, due to the fact that even if you take the performance contribution of the solution as it was expected a few years ago, so when it was under development in Cesar, and what is the actual value obtained by these solutions that have been implemented in real operation, of course, you also have to compare the different environments, the different assumptions. So also comparing the two performance results can be tricky. But it definitely gives the opportunity to understand how effective we are in let's say, quantifying expectations in terms of performance, and also to validate these solutions once they are implemented. So to validate also Cesar has a program.
I think, if I may comment on this, I think this is actually one of the main challenges we have ahead of us, to close the loop actually, and to be able to monitor this. We have been able to do some preliminary experiments thanks to some very kind contributions or collaboration from some ANSPs, NATs, and AIR. We are able to have some initial exercises of comparison between what was expected before, during research phase as a result of the deployment, and what was later observed. There are some initial conclusions and very interesting on that direction, because of course you cannot decouple factors, so it's also something interesting to consider. The main takeaway we could say today, I think, is to tell you that this is very present in our minds. There are known efforts for this. There are challenges, but there is also the interest to monitor this deployment and to see how it compares. It's not immediate, as Ricardo said. There are some preliminary exercises internal, but I would say that in the future you will see this happen.
I like a question. It's, I think, for engineers. So I will pass the ball to you, Ishar, and Jose Manuel. So by Francisco Antunes, how well or to what extent are the ATM simulation models generalizable in real-world systems? So what is the confidence we usually have in these simulation results in terms of representing reality? So how
I used to be an engineer once. That I have a paper who said that, but I think that in particular in fast-time simulators, models are quite accurate, and you can have some good statistical significance. But normally, when it comes to a single solution, when a single concept, when it comes to how things work together, you need to really the influence of one model with the other really impact. We would like to see this kind of simulation tools for multi-concept assessment happening in the future. There are two ongoing exploratory projects in this direction, Sinbad and Nostromo. You can get some answers to that question in there. They are promising. We would like to see those features incorporated to the future performance management task in Cesar 3. So your question is very pertinent, and yeah, as I said, single solution, they work well. Multiple solutions, we need to evolve, and we rely very much on these two projects addressing that challenge. Isiar, I don't know if you have a different view.
No, I agree with your approach. Yeah.
And then we have a philosophical question. I don't know whether you're also a philosopher, guys. And again, by a person with a very difficult name, Michael Nakti Heiler. I hope I didn't make a mistake. So how is ensured that the Kpi philosophy is applied in a synchronized manner throughout all phases of ATM modernization? So from R&D to deployment, from all affected bodies and organizations, Eurocontrol, SSGU, SDM, PRB. I think this is... Yeah,
it's not ensured nowadays, just by the fact that there is a growing interest, and I think this is linked to some of the previous questions. There is a growing interest to see how this loop closes. So you can always put some complementary metrics, but I think that at the end of the day, you should be able to use the same one or to map or to translate between them. I think this transparency, this having a continuous seamless traceability of results is fundamental. So no explicit mechanism is nowadays put in place, but somehow we all have the same background, the same layer. Performance scheme is the fundamental reference here, I would say. So most people tend to adhere to it as much as possible. And normally when you don't, it's because you can't, and you try to later on translate. So somehow that is underlying in everyone, not explicit. Maybe we should work on making that more explicit and reporting, not just translating into performance ambition, but maybe also into performance scheme. Would be a good additional feature, I would say.
Okay, maybe a more technical question now from Deborah Rushton. Please, can you explain the difference between a KPI and the benefit mechanism? I think this is an important question because it's actually about the methodology. So
yeah, that's the one I answered before very quickly. No problem. I'll repeat it again. The benefit mechanism is conceptual. So it's like I'm going to impact this KPI in this way. The KPI is the measure that you use for the actual indicator, and that will reflect if you are improving or not. One is conceptual and the other is quantitative.
Okay, thanks, Jose Manuel. There's a question by Sebastian Ricaher. I think maybe you already answered this one about PAGAR and the distinction between ATM and use space, for example, for capacity. So basically, how do we distinguish the two areas and how actually we integrate them in the future? If there is a possibility to integrate them in a potential future evolution of the performance framework.
I would say this is a bit preliminary. We don't have the answers because we are right now developing the first version of the use-based performance framework as Cesar presented. That will certainly be the ambition. We are working very closely with PJ20, with Jens Fischer on this matter, and the ambition would be to try to provide an overall view, an impact view of one side and the other, let's say. If not, would have to be separated. It's something we need to explore. I don't have an answer for that yet because we are shaping right now the framework.
Yeah, and also I would like to add that we need to take into account that some of the impacts that we will have in the US space will have a detrimental effect in the ATM assessment. So we should also try to find a way to account for not only the benefits that the US space will bring, but also the negative impact that it will have in today's aerospace ATM assessment.
Thank you, Isher. There's another question by Hans Ollongren, whether we can give some examples on particular projects which have resulted in significant improvements and also the opposite. I would like maybe to say first that what is important for Cesar is the fact that solutions measure. It's absolutely key that regardless of the validation targets or estimated performance contributions, the solutions actually commit resources and they commit themselves to provide us with assessments, regardless of the fact that their achievements are higher or lower than expected. Do we have maybe, Jose Manuel, you are a computer, you know all the Cesar solutions, especially from Cesar 1.
You are trusting my memory, which is not too good. What I can do is answer this question offline. PAGAR contains a section per KPA where we list all the contributors, we rank them. As Ricardo said, this is not a competition, not at all. Yeah, we have a list of top contributors per KPA. I can share this information in the answers offline.
Another question by Mario Pavon. The performance assessment will be part of the research activity, in brackets solution requirements. So in the validation and measurement of useful KPIs might involve the research activity itself. I think we need to clarify this part. So basically, Mario is asking whether the measurement of the identified KPIs in the validation targets. I think we need to clarify that this is part of the of the expected contribution of Cesar solutions. So it's not an additional activity, it's the activity. So it's very important for solutions to plan well in advance their resources and to invest these resources on the measurements of the expected key performance areas. And there is the methodology that Jose Manuel has described. And of course, in his last slide, he also provides you with some additional supports, which is the community of practices and also specific training. So where you can basically become familiar with the performance methodology that has to be applied. Do you want to add anything else, Jose Manuel? Or
no? That's perfect. Just to again remind that we try to be reachable for any question, any comment you may have. So anyone willing to join those communities with a special comment or question, we are absolutely glad to talk to anyone and to include anyone in any working group.
Perfect. Thanks. I think we have time for another couple of questions. There's a question by Jaime Perez about interoperability. So he states that interoperability has been discussed in the performance framework since Cesar 1, but no metrics were ever defined. So he's wondering whether 19.4 is planning to define and measure interoperability in the future.
Yeah, it's true that actually in the task that we have for the US-based performance framework, in which we are going to try to incorporate these metrics, we have a team devoted to this task, and they are having some trouble. But we are attempting to introduce them as projects working in the US space express their interest in assessing the interoperability, and at least we want to have a metric or two that could be useful, and if in the future Cesar 3 we see that they need some refinements or some complementary metrics, we will work on that, but we will try to have them, but it's true that it's not an easy task.
Okay. There was another question. I'm trying to sort by votes. Because we are almost answered to all questions. There is a question about, this is I think an interesting question about network resiliency by Razul Sanai due to the events occurring in Ukraine, so the closure of airspace and also the COVID pandemic, whether Cesar 3 is going to dedicate projects on tactical resilience, so to ensure to have a network performance which can behave in a more predictive way when these unpredicted situations occur. Well, to be honest, I mean, we have not thought specific section, because also all these events, especially the crisis in Ukraine, is quite recent. But of course, this is one of the main areas for Cesar to guarantee let's say more resilience to the network. So there will be indeed some there will be possibilities for projects to provide some to investigate this to improve this specific Kpi. I know that the performance framework has also worked in the direction, has improved the resiliency indicator, although we don't have a Kpi yet. But there is some work to be done in terms of performance framework, but also, of course, the door is open for any future projects that will be questioning and trying to solve potential issues related to this particular aspect. So yes, I think that's all. It's almost 4 o'clock. Maybe we can wrap up this webinar. Well, I would like to thank, first of all, Ishar and Jose Manuel for their participation. It has been really appreciated. And well, I also want to thank you all participants. You've been more than 280 people today, so it's quite impressive. As I said at the beginning, we will make available the recording and also the presentations, but also we'll provide answers to all questions that you have posed and we didn't have time to answer. I just want to wrap up. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation as much as I did. We try to pass you some messages. In particular, I'll give you an overview of what performance means in Cesar, and the fact that Cesar is a performance-driven program, and also the relationship between Cesar and the performance scheme. We also provide you a little bit more details on the methodologies that we apply in-house, and thanks, Jose Manuel, for going to the details of this presentation. And the idea is to give you a kind of guidelines to better understand the main action that are expected from you. But of course, there is much more than this, so you are welcome to contact us for any additional explanations. And finally, we have concluded our webinar with Isha's presentation that try to focus more on the future perspective of Cesar, so in particular on the new areas that are being developed, use space, passenger experience, but also digitalization. So I hope you really enjoyed this webinar. Again, want to thank you all, and I wish you a fantastic day or a sleepy night if you are on the other side of the world. And from Brussels, that's all. Grazie mille, arrivederci.
Bye, thanks.
Bye, thank you very much.